The veterans regrouped after the first shock, trying to reclaim their confidence as the new recruit stood in the center of the training hall, surrounded by the fading echo of their failed attempt to unsettle her, and she felt the weight of their eyes searching for weakness that simply was not there, while the instructors watched silently from the upper platform, noting every shift in her stance and every measured breath she took. And in that heavy moment, the air in the compound seemed to grow denser, as if responding to her presence alone, and the veterans whispered among themselves, remembering stories of recruits who had risen fast or fallen faster, yet none of those tales felt large enough to hold what stood before them now. For her calm was not the calm of inexperience, but the calm of someone who had walked through storms unseen by others and returned carrying only silence. And as the drills resumed, the veterans moved with renewed urgency, trying to trap her rhythm, break her focus, and force her into errors that would reassure them that she was just another trainee. But each motion they launched dissolved harmlessly into her flowing steps, as if she had already lived these moments long before and knew exactly where each strike would land long before they attempted it, and their confusion grew into unease. Because she did not resist them out of anger or adrenaline, but with a quiet certainty that felt almost ancient. And by the time the lead veteran stepped forward to perform the compound signature trial, the others had already stepped back. Sensing this was the moment the entire room had been turning towards since she arrived, and the lead veteran carried in his stance the history of those who had passed and failed and survived these trials before, and he circled her, waiting for the tremor of doubt that usually appeared in every new recruit. At this stage, yet no matter how long he studied her face, he found only the steady gaze of someone who had made peace with something far beyond this hall. And as they finally collided in a blur of force and movement, the watching recruits felt the floor tremble with every shift, as if the compound itself was leaning closer, trying to witness what was unfolding. And in that charged instant, when the lead veteran thought he finally had her cornered, she stepped into his space, not with aggression, but with understanding, and something in his expression faltered just enough for her to move past him in a single sweeping motion that left the circle stunned as she stood there, untouched, and waiting for what they would try next, as a cold draft drifted across the hall, carrying with it a sound that none of them could place, yet all of them felt in their bones, as if something unseen had just drawn closer. The instructors descended from their platform for the first time in years, their boots thudding heavily against the training hall floor as they approached the recruit, each one trying to read the quiet force that seemed to rise around her like an unseen tide, and she felt their presence settle around her, forming a boundary that was not meant to contain her, but to measure her, as if they were confirming some old theory whispered between the walls long before she ever arrived. And the lead instructor, an imposing figure who rarely spoke during trials, stepped into the circle and told the veterans to stand down, while he regarded the recruit with the wary respect of someone who had spent a lifetime encountering unpredictable power and surviving only because he knew how to recognize it early. And the tension in the hall thickened as the other instructors exchanged glances, unsure whether they had just witnessed a prodigy, a threat, or something that did not yet have a name within their ranks. And the recruit felt the shift in their attention, but she refused to shrink beneath it, for she understood that strength was not shown through defiance, but through the quiet steadiness that refused to bend beneath fear. And when the instructor signaled for the next phase of the evaluation, the veterans reacted with visible dread, because they all knew the next test had broken even the most promising candidates, often leaving them shaken or entirely undone. Yet the recruit stepped forward without hesitation, moving with the certainty of someone who had already accepted whatever truth the trial would reveal about her. And as the hall doors rumbled open, revealing a corridor lit by a dim and pulsing blue glow, she felt something familiar stir in the air, as if a memory long buried was rising to meet her. And the instructors followed at a careful distance, watching her silhouette move toward the threshold of the sealed chamber that held the compound's most guarded challenge. one that none of the active veterans had ever completed without consequence. And as she reached the final step before crossing into the chamber, the corridor lights flickered in. A rhythm that made the instructors tense, for they had seen that pattern only once before, in an incident kept locked in the archives and whispered about only. In warnings shared after lights out and the recruit paused, sensing that the glow behind the chamber door was responding to her presence alone, as though whatever waited inside had been dormant for years, waiting for the arrival of someone it already knew was meant to face it. Next to darkness behind the steel door thickened as the new recruit stepped inside the chamber, where the walls rose high and smooth, without markings, as though carved from a single block of ancient stone, and the air carried a quiet hum that vibrated faintly beneath her skin like a distant heartbeat, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And the veterans who had followed at a cautious distance stood at the threshold, unable to cross because something in the room warned them with a force older than instinct that they were not meant to witness what was coming, and the instructors felt it too, for they recognized the silent pressure that marked the presence of the dormant system, created long before their time, a system built only to react when someone of the correct resonance stepped before it. And the recruit felt that resonance pulling at her, guiding her toward the center where a circular platform rose, 1 inch above the ground, as though waiting for her steps alone to complete an unfinished pattern. And with each step she took, the hum in the chamber deepened into a low rumble, causing the veterans to brace themselves against the doorframe, while the instructors exchanged alarmed glances, for they had all been taught that the system would only activate in the presence of an individual carrying the rare imprint of an older lineage, one believed to have vanished long before any of them were born. Yet the recruit walked as if she had known this chamber all her life, and as she reached the platform, the room responded with a surge of shifting shadows swirling upward to form a towering shape that flickered like living smoke and held no face, yet its attention locked onto her as though it could see every moment she had ever lived and every secret she had ever buried. And the veterans felt a chill cut through the corridor, while the broader instructors instinctively stepped back, understanding that this was not an enemy, but a trial that tested more than strength or endurance, for it tested lineage, identity, and truth without mercy. And the recruit raised her chin steady as the shadow figure leaned closer, until she could feel the weight of its ancient memory pressing against her like a tide seeking the shape of her soul. And something inside her stirred in response, not out of fear, but recognition. A recognition that made the instructors freeze, for recognition meant connection, and connection meant she was not only compatible with the system, but also, potentially, the heir to what the compound founders had hidden here. And as the shadow shuddered and expanded, filling the chamber with a pulsing glow, the veterans felt the structure tremble around them, and the instructors realized that if she failed this test, the chamber would collapse, sealing everything inside, as it had done once before decades ago, trapping the last candidate who awakened it. And as the glow intensified, the recruit stepped fully onto the platform, accepting whatever truth waited within the rising storm of light, knowing there was no turning back, as the shadow reached out with a final surge that swallowed her in a wave of brilliance, leaving the observers unsure whether she would emerge or be erased by the force that now towered above them, waiting for what came next. When the light receded, the chamber fell into a stillness so profound that even the veterans held their breath, waiting for movement from the center of the room, and the instructors braced themselves for the possibility that the system had chosen to end the trial as it had done in the past, leaving only silence where a candidate had stood moments before. Yet instead, the light dimmed enough for them to see the recruit still standing on the platform, her posture unchanged, but her presence transformed, as though she now carried the echo of something that had merged with her, and the shadow figure had shrunk into a faint outline surrounding her like a cloak made from memory. And the instructors sensed with rising unease that she had passed the trial in a way none of them understood, because the system had not merely acknowledged her, It had accepted her, and the chamber walls responded with a slow vibration that deepened into rhythmic pulses, forming patterns that none of the veterans recognized, but the lead instructor recognized immediately, for they were activation sequences used only when a successor had been found, and the veterans looked to him for answers, but he could only stare at the recruit as though seeing her for the first time, as the pulses echoed through the hall and traveling deeper into the compound, awakening systems that had been dormant for generations, and the hum of power intensified until sections of the far wall groaned.